The anime begins in a place with the red alert on, surrounded by fallen people and despair everywhere. In the midst of this, a boy named Yogiri walks calmly through the corridor, seemingly unconcerned with the chaos around him, until he stands in front of a camera and asks where a woman named Asaka is. Right in front of him, the entrance to a room opens, and there is the woman Yogiri is looking for being threatened by another who's pointing a gun at her. The boy approaches the situation as if he doesn't understand what's happening, welcoming the woman as if she doesn't have a gun aimed at her head. The aggressor tells the boy to step back or the worst could happen, but at that moment the boy triggers a mysterious effect that instantly eliminates the armed woman. Seeing the scene, Asaka questions what that was, but before she could reflect more on the matter, Yogiri hugs the girl and calls her back home. After this, we see that Yogiri was just dreaming while his friend Tamachika Denura tries to wake up the boy in a hurry. Yogiri is still sleepy on the school bus, but the girl can't believe that he can sleep in the situation they are in, with a gigantic dragon massacring their classmates. Without being sure if he still thinks he's dreaming, the protagonist throws a microphone at the creature's tail, which was piercing a student, until the monster startles with the audacity and turns back towards the bus, threatening to breathe fire at the two humans. However, before any harm could reach them, Yogiri opens an imaginary portal in his mind, and his eyes burn with a contained flame, and as soon as he opens his mouth, the huge dragon dies in the blink of an eye. Denura is safe, but she can't understand how that monster simply fell without a reasonable explanation, and furthermore, Yogiri remains oblivious to the gravity of the situation, then proceeds to turn on his Nintendo to play. Incredulous, the girl starts to protest that the man is unable to talk about all this like a normal person, but as Yogiri is busy crushing a red dragon, the young woman gives up getting worked up and tries to convince her classmate to run off the bus. Seeing that the girl has calmed down, Yogiri puts away the game and asks what the heck is going on. Thus, Denura explains that the whole class was on that bus, heading for an excursion. However, after passing through a tunnel, on the other side was a stunning landscape, and for no apparent reason, an unknown girl gets on the bus and introduces herself to everyone as Cheyenne, the stage. One of the organizers of the excursion asks what this girl is doing there, but she ignores the question and blows up the man, continuing the conversation, emphasizing that the students should pay attention only to her and nothing else. She explains that she has no intention of hurting anyone, but if anyone says anything, they will regret it. After all, the little sage's attack power is 530,000, and anyone who challenges that has certainly thrown their life in the trash. Apparently, this was a joke on her part, but since no one laughed, she decided to massacre the bus driver just because the audience's ignorance annoyed her. After that, she tells those present that they are in an ice cave, also known as a kind of parallel world, and that she summoned them all as potential sages. This world is ruled by this class, so sometimes it is important to replenish some numbers that were lost. Then Shine invokes a magic similar to a rainbow and envelops the students with an installation called Battle Song, where each user can see their own statistics and the class to which they belong according to the person's talent. However, as Denura did not receive this installation, she asks her friend Maikoki what she is seeing, and she was placed in the Necromancer class. According to Cheyenne, the aspirants will have a month to become sages, otherwise only God knows what will happen to the failures. Seeing that it might end up being her, Denura raises her hand and comments that she was left out of the selection, but the sage makes it clear that the girl does not have the necessary gift to participate in the process. Despite this, perhaps out of pure sadism, Cheyenne warns that Denura also needs to become a sage, otherwise she will become a mere cattle in the farm of life. Finally, the sage sets a 1-hour limit to complete the first mission, then gets off the bus and leaves. Confused, Denura sits next to Maikoki to see what's going on, and the friend tells her that the first objective is to get rid of a level 1000 dragon that is coming to attack. However, ironically, the regulations themselves state that no one there is capable of facing an enemy of that level at the stage they are in. Next, a guy named Suguru Yazaki leads the group and showing leadership skills. He calls his colleagues to show their abilities and form a strategy for the task. Meanwhile, Yogiri is in the 7th heaven and stays out of the team formation. Denura notices that besides her, 2 other classmates were without the battle song, Ayaka Shinozaki and Yuichiro Kiryu. For this reason, they were forced to stay inside the bus, while everyone involved with the installation left under Yazaki's leadership, who, when dealing with the revolt of the excluded, shows that those who receive the gift have their physical abilities enhanced even at the first level. And with that strength, he breaks 2 seats of the bus and blocks the passage outside because, according to him, the excluded have no special abilities, so they will be a burden to the others. Denura thinks differently and believes that the privileged should protect the weaker ones, but the group leader is insistent in his response, revealing that this is a strategy, then calls Asuba Koriyama, the beauty coordinator, to cast a charm on all the excluded, making them attractive to the dragon and consequently, bait to be eaten, while the rest of the group gains time to reach the city. In a panic, Danora finds it absurd and questions if the leader decided this alone, as no one in their right mind would accept it. Mikochi surely voted against it. However, Yazaki responds quite curtly that Danora's friend agreed to the plan, and after that, he locks the renegades in the bus and continues with his strategy. Shortly after, the dragon had already flown over the car and slaughtered Shinozaki and Kiryu, leaving only the last two rejects after Yogiri woke up from his beauty sleep and killed the winged monster with the power of thought. And speaking of the guy, even after hearing this whole story about sages in a parallel world with creatures that spit fire, all that concerned him was how he would recharge his Nintendo in that Asaka. However, after Danora complained about this indifference, he gets up and realizes that if they believe Yazaki, then there's only one dragon to be slain, and since that one has turned to dust, it might be safe to go outside. Despite this observation, Danora still seemed concerned about why they were in this place, and Yogiri suggests the version that they crashed the bus and everyone is dead. The girl doesn't like this idea, but the guy is convinced when he says she doesn't have to believe him if she doesn't want to. So it's to get out of the car and are faced with three path choices: mountain, city, or forest. Yogiri dismisses the forest right away, but before advancing his reasoning, Danora sees three students approaching through the air. Yogiri recommends they knock down the birds as a precaution, but Danora responds that nowhere is it written that you need to kill three classmates just because they are flying towards you. Speaking of them, the healer of the group, Hanakawa, regrets that the girl is still alive because it ruined their plan to turn her corpse into a zombie. Higashida, the hero class, had warned that it wasn't certain the girl was dead, while Fukuhara, the necromancer, always found the idea of controlling the poor thing like an undead somewhat strange. As expected, Danora realizes that they did not come in friendship, but before she can act, Higashida launches a fireball that devastates a mountain 100 meters away, considering a warning for the girl not to resist. When asked why they want to kidnap the victim, the three aspirants imply that they want to use Danora for some malicious games. Therefore, Yogiri knew he needed to put them in a negotiating position, so he used the weapon of dialogue on the rival leader Higashida. He points his index finger at the hero and utters the word die. Watching the scene, the two companions burst into laughter because of the guy's hilarious attitude. However, the joke ends when Higashida drops dead instantly. Astonished, the two remaining partners ask what Yogiri did, and without hesitation, he coldly replies that he told Higashida to die, and he died. From what they saw, it wasn't very difficult to understand, but it seems Fukuhara didn't want to take it seriously when Yogiri told no one to move, and when the necromancer went to see if his friend was still alive, he ended up with the same fate. Finally, the assassin repeats the same order to the remaining boy, Hanakawa, and the healer decides to place statue instantly. Thus, the overpowered one finally has the chance to explain his ability. First, he has the chubby one check if the other two are really dead. Then Hanakawa tries to heal his friends, but in vain because they really went to a better place. Second, the protagonist even complains that it's a pain to explain this, but in a summarized way, he reveals that his ability is called instant death for any target. If he simply thinks of killing someone, that person dies immediately. Hanakawa responds that such a thing does not exist, and Yogiri asks if he wants to serve as the last evidence. The healer hesitates, but still tries to take advantage of an opportunity to attack the enemy, but Yogiri can also identify any intent to eliminate him, so the attack could not have succeeded. In fact, he can kill the target just by thinking of eliminating Yogiri. That is, it seems that nothing can go right against this guy. He is the very definition of overpower. In this case, all that's left is to sit and cry, and that's exactly what Hanakawa does. And to mock them, Yogiri asks why these three were so proud of these basic talents, and Hanakawa responds that it's not the first time they've entered this world. Not long ago, the mage from the kingdom of Amen summoned them to defeat the demon lord, and after they spent a year there and completed the mission, they returned to the real world. Yogiri turns to Danora, and both comment that they didn't even realize that those three had been absent from school for all this time, but Hanakawa was willing to maintain his heroic pose, so he clarifies that time passes differently there, and as soon as they return to Earth, only a few hours had passed. Soon, Yogiri discovers that there is a chance to go back and raises his hand against the victim, who pleads for her life to the point of asking Danora to convince Lord Takatu to give up this idea. However, as he was the one who saved her life, she doesn't think she has to give her opinion on this problem. Thus, as a last resort, the Mark for Death guy takes out a rare artifact that promises to enslave the user, subjecting him to all the wills of the first person he encounters. Soon he puts on the collar and starts to humiliate himself for his new mistress, Danora, but the girl found the guy's approach a bit disgusting and tells him to step back, tightening the leash. She tries to pass the ownership of the healer to Yogiri, but he cries just at the thought of not being enslaved by Lady Tomochika. Despite that, the exchange was already done and Yogiri promises not to kill the poor guy after this pathetic humiliation, but he sends the guy into a forest full of evil beasts just for him to see something real quick. So before he leaves, the master instructs the servant to leave behind everything of value, and faced with an obscene amount of adventured gold, Hanako obeys his lord's order and heads into the woods. When asked if the healer couldn't be useful, Yogiri responds that the guy could betray them at any moment. Hearing this, Denora asks if she couldn't do the same, but the protagonist seems aware of it and prefers to take the risk. Surprised, his companion wants to know the reason for this, as they've never been ones to talk much. However, the young man seems not to have a good reason for it. But after a few reflective seconds, he remembers when Denora hugged him at the moment when the dragon was about to attack them. On that occasion, the girl's embrace made him feel the voluminous softness of her water balloons, and in response, Denora curses her savior. And in the meantime, in an enigmatic floating castle, Yuchi, the assistant to the wise Cheyenne, reports on the first mission of the new potential sages. The mission was successfully completed, but there were 4 fatalities. Cheyenne quickly thinks that the 4 renegades were the ones who died, but the assistant reveals that, in fact, only 2 outcasts were eliminated. In addition to these, 2 more of rank S, as the more experienced ones died suddenly. Perhaps this is the work of instant death magic. However, despite the seriousness of the matter, Cheyenne doesn't pay much attention to the problem and leaves it to Yuichi to act as he sees fit. So after a long walk, the protagonists reach the city. Despite Denora's excitement, Takatu is just eager to take a nap. Nevertheless, the guards are closing the gate, but the girl is in a hurry and tries to convince them to let them in. Instead of letting them in, the guards put the duo under the watch of Masahiko, a city representative. He questions how this second group of candidates appeared alone after the entire group had already arrived. Takatu explains that they got separated from the larger group. Masahiko seems bothered by this story and clarifies that they would usually charge a toll from the boys, but they were instructed not to mess with sage candidates. The protagonist ignores the fuss and mentions they heard about a capital, asking how they can get there. Masahiro seizes the opportunity and retorts that they were told not to interfere with the candidate's path, but no one said they couldn't help them. Takatu sarcastically thanks for the help and leaves, but the representative goes further, suggesting that the girl could spend the night at his mansion. Denora is embarrassed, pulls Takatu away, and they run off. Some time later, Denora feared that Takatu might have to kill that man. On the other hand, he feels offended and asks if she thinks he's some kind of lunatic. She responds that the part of him that hasn't realized that is the most charming. After that, they start exploring the city. Denora is excited that the place looks like it's from a fantasy movie with people resembling animals. Mairyu, one of them, greets the 2 outsiders and asks if everything's meow with them. As it seems to be their first time there, she also asks if they have problems or another kind of meow. Without answering the questions, Takatu asks what she wants. The cat gets straight to the point, expressing her desire to be close to sage candidates because they have a promising future and are easy to seduce. Denora comments that the cat is very direct, but Mairyu clarifies that she would never hit on a guy with a girlfriend. She adds that the key to success is developing a very mild friendship with the candidates. Takatu asks what she thinks about bringing the cat along. As she wanted to take a look at the city before dark, they decide to go with Mireio. However, this outing turns bad as the cat convinces Denora to buy a bunch of expensive things she'll never use, only to end up cornered by a gang of anthropomorphs in the dead of night. The gang leader, the only human, mocks Takatu for being so calm in such a situation. When asked if they want money, the boss says it's one of the goals, but the main course is talentless sage candidates. Takatu confirms he understands their objectives, but will have to eliminate them. Concerned, Denora tries to warn Mairyu that the guy isn't to be messed with, but she dismisses it as a stupid bluff, saying 2 weaklings without Dom can't do anything in this situation. Then Takatu gives the first command, and the row of enemies behind them falls lifeless. He commands the leopard man to die halfway, but by the way he fell, Takatu notices that even halfway is too much. So he decides to control this power more and nullifies the right ankle of the rooster and the left arm of one of the dogs. Obviously, the rest of the henchmen were already terrified, and even Denora suggests that Takatu is going too far, but he responds with indifference, stating that when he tried to go easy, nobody paid attention. Therefore, he attacks the 2 eyes of another dog, and when the lizard tries to attack, he quickly deals with him too. Witnessing such madness, Mireyu asks Takatu what kind of male he is exactly, but the boy responds that he doesn't even know. Soon he evaluates if his measured abilities were useful, but concludes that it's not efficient to destroy specific parts of someone's body. Plus, he doesn't like the feeling of intentionally torturing someone. Mairyu panics and pleads for her life, mentioning her siblings at home, but Takatu argues that it doesn't justify kidnapping and selling people. Then he raises his right index finger and commands the end for both, but instead, nothing happens. Faced with the stroke of luck, the two thugs swim to freedom while Takatu watches their escape without a reaction. Denura tries to understand, asking if he let them go, but he says it wasn't the intention. Meanwhile, the two villains are running as fast as they can, and Miryu continues to wonder who the hell that kid is. But before any conclusion, her life is taken along with the bosses. She falls from the roof where she was hiding, and her last regret was getting involved with those criminals. Finally, the protagonist duo tries to get out of there before any trouble arises. However, the city guard, led by George and Delgard, is already there, wanting to ask some questions to the two wrongdoers. Takatu takes charge of the interrogation, explaining that they were just passing through and everyone else was already on the ground. However, Delgard caught the boy in the act as she saw the bandits fall at the moment they were about to attack Takatu. This leaves Denura furious for being labeled as suspicious, while the city guard, supposedly witnessing everything, did absolutely nothing to intervene. However, Albert explains that she was trying to trace the buyers of humans from this gang. Finally, she adds that it's better for those candidates not to raise a finger against the guard because they possess the protection of the wise, so the gift does not affect them. Yet Jorge's appraisal skill identified that neither of those two has the gift, meaning it's difficult to assert that they could really take down an entire gang. With this, Adelgard gives up and leaves, but before that, George apologizes for the captain's ignorance, and Takatu asks the guard to find a place for them to spend the night. Despite this, Adelgard ends up finding one of the henchmen alive, the dog that ended up blinded. Still, the two protagonists finally have a moment of peace, hosted in a hotel that looks like a castle, according to Denura, although she has never seen one in her life. As for the rooms, Takatu asks if they can share one, but since the girl finds that a bit too much, he asks her to at least arrange a room next to his. She enters her huge room, and as soon as she jumps on the bed, she questions what idea Takatu had about sharing the room. Upon reflection, she realizes that they've been together every second in that world and wonders if he might like her, even though he only made it clear that he likes one specific thing about her. But the reflection ends when a spirit invades the room. Despite the initial scare, Denura seemed more scared by the fact of finding this spirit in this world, as she asks what the older sister is doing there. Then, the spirit is offended by being compared to that figure and introduces itself as Mokomoko Denura, wife of the founder's son of Denura School, known as the restorer of the school and protector of the Denura family, ancestor of Tamachika Denura and guardian spirit. After this flood of description, Tamachika asks the spirit to take it easy, or she won't be able to keep so much information in her head. Later, Mokomoko warns that Tamachika is in great danger, so she had to appear there to help. But as she has been through a lot to get there, the young girl wonders why the guardian spirit didn't appear earlier when she was in the thick of it. Mokomoko explains that she was afraid of that guy Takatu because if she appeared out of nowhere in front of him, she risked being erased from the face of the earth, as his ability works even with paranormal beings. For this reason, Tamachika Denura must inform the boy tomorrow about the existence of the ghost sister, because only then the spirit will be able to stay safe. Furthermore, she reveals that she can protect Tamachika from everything except physical attacks. In fact, she prevented the installation of the battle song in the girl. As Yogiri was upset about being left without it, Mokomoko explains that that installation has certain advantages, it's true, but once installed in the mind, the wise ones gain control over you. Finally, she confesses that she would love to take away the successor of Denura Archery School, a mixed martial art practice since the Heian dynasty. But since Tamachika is stuck in this world depending on Takatu, the spirit decides to teach the true art of Denura and names this mission Operation. My guardian spirit is the strongest. No one in this other world has a chance against him. The next morning, Denura was exhausted, and when she meets Takatu again, a receptionist named Celestina informs that since yesterday she had been trying to locate their classmates as well as preparing the language translation, status concealment items, and even arrange a charger for Takatu's Nintendo. Finally, she gives the boys 2 tickets to the capital, departing tomorrow at noon. Moreover, she accepts the boy's request to guard all his treasure, and as she even did that, Denura is amazed at the efficiency of this worker. The next morning, the group heads to the new city, and Tamachika is wondering why she is turning the crank of a portable game charger inside the ghostly stomach of a guardian spirit from the Heian dynasty. In the meantime, Mokomoko makes it clear that she does not take up physical space so the young girl can relax. Because of that, Tamachika asks the spirit to sit next to Takatu, but the old apparition is still terrified of the boy. Therefore, he calms the ghost and reveals that he has been able to see her since Tamachika warned him of her existence, and in any case, Tamachika can also sit next to him if she's uncomfortable. With that done, Yogiri Takatu informs that Celestina, the receptionist, thinks their classmates are near the primitive forest, and Denura does not understand how this woman knows so much. At that moment, Takatu lays the girl on the bench, and the roof of the car goes flying. As for the previous city guard, they are trying to extract information from the henchman who survived the assault. A vampire named Lane takes the lead in the process. She is of the original blood class, the highest rank of undead, and analyzing the eyes of the wounded, she is impressed how the blindness of the dog shows no bruising or injury. Then she removes the criminal's eye and heals him with another. Still, he continues unable to see, so Lane bites the dog, who, by linking to the vampire's bloodline, his physical strength grew monstrously. Nevertheless, the vision has not yet returned, which Lane finds intriguing. At that moment, a knight invades the chamber, and as he could not be seen, George analyzes that being belongs to the Bravo class. Back on the train, the announcer warns that a sage is dealing with an aggressor, making Takatu realize that no one is after them. So they head out to see what's happening, and an invading robot is fighting a local protector. Denora asks if Takatu shouldn't erase both since they are in the way. The young man counters with another question. If he should erase everyone who stands in his path, then should he erase everyone who appears in front of him? After all, he has to establish some rules from this ability. Despite his speech, shortly afterward, the two fighters approach the civilians and the sage freezes a bunch of citizens. Meanwhile, the other swordsman reveals himself as Ain and attacks Lane, but the vampire instantly heals every damage she receives. She then questions why Bravo is attacking a sage when he should be facing the demon lord. However, Ain is determined to wipe out all the sages from the earth with his sacred sword Kartina, causing an explosion in the tower, where everyone was mentioning Ariel's name as he celebrates victory. Back on the train, Takatu asks why the sage attacked them, and Santoru becomes irritated with the insolence since sages should be praised on their knees instead of questioned in this way. He even calls Takatu a monstrosity. In response, Takatu finds a reason to erase the sage. In the meantime, the aggressor robot approaches and says it has no intention of fighting. In front of Ain, the vampire asks if Ariel is his lover. Bravo doesn't understand how she survived that, and she replies that she didn't survive, and not even death can hold her, unfortunately. Thus, even after Ain surrenders his life, she decides to spare him but throws Ain down the tower and orders her subordinates to track Yogiri Takatu. The young man is talking to the robot, who notes his ability so it's willing to give anything it can in exchange for avoiding conflict. Takatu asks if the robot knows any way to return to their world, but the aggressor only knows the way back to its own world and can't take Takatu along because, besides not being physically present in this space, it also couldn't bring someone so dangerous to its world. With that, Takatu is satisfied with the help, but Mokomoko wanted to ask one more little favor from the outsider before he leaves. Hours later, George and Edelgard find Santoru's body and inform their leader. With images of the incident, Lane suspects that Yogiri Takatu has the instant death ability, but Cheyenne recalls that Santoru was resistant to that technique, so she instructs her subordinate to investigate if Takatu has any connection to the darkness. Then she sends one of her subordinates, Masayuki, to lead the immortal army to Hanabusa, even if it causes the destruction of that city. Meanwhile, the protagonists decide to leave on their own since they didn't want to be seen with an aggressor, and Mokomoko presents Denura with a sword made from pieces disguised in the girl's clothing, leaving Tomochika wondering how to use a sci-fi weapon that works this way. After their journey, they arrive in the city of Hanabusa, according to Denura, a typical Japanese town. She asks Takatu if he wouldn't like some time to develop his skills, but he replies that he was practicing with some bandits and beasts that were chasing them along the way. When the girl looks back, she sees a pile of bodies behind them. Denura tells him to warn her when there's an enemy behind her because walking unaware is dangerous. The guy just affirms that he knows that very well. Later, she comments that since he gets tired after using his powers, maybe he can only use them a few times a day. Contrary to that, Takatu reveals that it's the fact that he gets tired that allows him to keep using them, making the girl realize that this young man's prowess knows no bounds. Entering the city, Mokomoko notes that instead of protecting themselves with walls, they seem to have set up a magical barrier. Until they reach a tall hotel, the one Celestina mentioned they would find. The group decides to use the hotel as a base, and Denura rushes in, excited about the size of the place. Once inside, everyone sees that the place is truly fancy, and a classmate named Yuki Takabana approaches the girl in the group, expressing happiness that she is safe. Denura asks what he's doing there, and he replies that he doesn't have to stay with people who level up inefficiently. Beside him, a girl named Erika asks who the girl he's talking to is, displaying basic jealousy for everyone to see. But Takabana clarifies that they are just classmates, so there's nothing to it. On the other side, another girl praises her master for having such a kind heart even when dealing with rude people. Meanwhile, Denura asks who these strange people are, and since Takatu knows as much as she does, Takabana introduces his hand-picked bodyguards. The blonde is Erika from the 5th class. She doesn't care to introduce herself, but as Yugi ordered, she obeys. Next is Stephanie, from the 4th class, who makes it clear she doesn't want to talk to those strange people unless her master orders her to. In the 3rd class, Chelsea introduces herself in the most timid way possible, placing a bear in front of her face to simulate the plush, commanding the death of some girl inside her head. Then, Euphemia introduces herself as from the 2nd class. Finding Denura very ugly, she earnestly asks the girl to stay as far away as possible. Last but not least, the captain of the bodyguards introduces herself as Riza. In an excessively serious tone, she asks Denura not to be so arrogant as to think that Tachibana is just a classmate. With the end of this presentation round, Denura asks if the girls can stop being so aggressive for no reason, but Tachibana apologizes, saying he's not very good at being tough with girls. In the end, he asks everyone to be quiet for now. After that, Takadu comments to his friend that this guy was one of the students who stayed behind on the bus, but has no idea how he ended up here with these women behind him. Denura responds that the guy has always been popular among girls and quite cocky, so it seems he's just continuing that. Convinced of his ways, Tachibana soon invites Denura to be another one of his lovers. As the girl reacts negatively, he thinks it's because of Taka too and decides to make an exception for a man in the group so both could be his slaves. Denura was trying to understand if the guy was serious, while Taka too decided not to kill him now, thinking the young man might have some issues in his head. Denura asks why the boy is so arrogant, and Tachibana explains that he is from the Dominator class, a class with the ability to enslave lower-level individuals. But Denura implies that he must be way behind the level of the rest of the student group since they are busy with missions, while he's out there playing Simon Says. With that, Tachibana thinks Denura is already so in love that she wants to know everything about his life. So the Dominator reveals that there was a party to celebrate the success of the first mission in the city where he was. He was drinking at a table alone during the celebration when a classmate named Haruto Otori asked for permission and sat with him. As a member of the consultant class, Otori advises Tachibana to enslave first-level servants and make them level up. As they defeat new people, those defeated will also be enslaved, and much of that experience will pass to both of them. Since Tachibana didn't know he could do that, Otori explains that one of his abilities as a consultant is to know various hidden powers that people are unaware of. Finally, Otori says he's giving this advice because Tachibana is promising, and as the Dominator class is rarer, it would be foolish not to rely on a sage with such talent. With that, he bids farewell and wishes good luck to his colleague. With this story, the Dominator justifies why he's evolving without lifting a finger. He levels up by enslaving people who do the dirty work for him. And telling this story, he asks Denura once again if she would like to join his group, and the girl feels even more motivated to decline the invitation. So Tachibana asks the girl to just think about it and leaves. Takatu comments that Denura would probably be safer with that guy than with him, but the girl shows with her face that this opinion was quite unnecessary. Meanwhile, Lane is seeking to confront the darkness, and when she comes across it, the vampire asserts with conviction that this creature stands no chance against her. Back at the hotel, Denura wonders how long they will stay in that hotel, as it's been 3 days since they arrived. So she asks Mokomoko to go into his room and see what's going on, but the ghost won't enter that room even if they pay her, as she has no idea how the guy will react to such a sudden invasion. Then, Denura sees the city upside down below her because a servant named Masayuki had finally arrived wreaking havoc. With the immortal body beside him, any citizen run over by them would be turned into a third-class zombie. Inside the hotel, Mokomoko notices that the people there are not good at all because they have the smell of death. As they witness the rapid decline of the city's population, another ghost approaches their door. Instead of Denura wanting to go down to see what's happening, she lies on the comfortable bed in that luxury room and ignores everything. Mokomoko disapproves of the young woman's attitude, saying she can't just pretend the city is falling apart. Moreover, there's a hostile presence nearby spying on them, so it's wise to stay alert. Fearing that the situation might be more serious than she imagines, Denura tries to call Takatu, but the boy is fast asleep, dreaming of a moment from his childhood. He is awakened by a female voice calling his name, while his dog Mikori licks the boy's face. He gets up, sees a girl inviting him for breakfast, but as soon as he says he's coming, Takatu is awakened by the phone and called to action. As soon as he steps out of the room, he senses a strange presence around, although he doesn't see anything. Therefore, he focuses his vision and detects a ghostly figure in the corner of the corridor. Immediately, he eliminates Erika, Tachibana's bodyguard. Then he reaches Denura and warns her of a hostile ghost behind her. At the same time, Tachibana is away inspecting the mission but realizes that his servant's signal has disappeared. Moreover, a creature invades the area where they were. Back to the protagonist, Denura recognizes the blonde as Erika, and Takatu knows this will be a big problem with her master. Therefore, they have to get out of there as quickly as possible. Denora mentions that she needs to gather her things first, and as she acts like she's just going out to buy bread, Takatu asks about the reason for her calmness. She replies that she's used to this kind of pressure, but when Mokomoko says that the Denora family doesn't give up easily, the young woman admits she's not as evolved as her ancestors. As for Tachibana, the giant insect attacking him proves to be no considerable challenge, visibly frustrating the Dominator who was expecting something more dangerous. He repels the monster with his protective barrier, and after tearing off his arms, Stephanie praises the fact that not even level 100 monsters can defeat her master. The monster is still alive and asks who this strong man is, but ignoring the enemy, Tachibana launches a flare bomb at the insect and enslaves it after the victory. Next, the new servant is healed and informs his master that these rooms go up to level 150, as he was asked. So the master orders the insect to recruit new servants in the lower levels. With that decided, Tachibana returns to Erika, and seeing on the servant's camera that she fell in the corridor out of nowhere and lost the signal, he is confused about the reason for this. Euphemia supposes that Erika was trying to please the boss by bringing that Danora girl he wanted, or just wanted to eliminate the girl due to their earlier disagreement. For this reason, the master orders Riza and Chelsea to go after Danora, as she might have killed Erika. Far away, Elaine seems to be having more trouble with the darkness than she thought. By striking the enemy's forehead, she knows that her high-speed revivification is much faster than the collapse of the darkness, but it seems that it's not causing any damage. Meanwhile, Takatu and Danora try to escape, but Riza appears in the corridor and freezes the two protagonists, hoping to take the girl to her master. However, Takatu destroys the ice as if it's nothing, since he just learned that he can eliminate ice as if it were an individual. Obviously, this leaves the captain embarrassed with how easily the prisoner freed himself from his attack. For this reason, she tries to increase the difficulty level and prepares to use her wand again in the fight. Nevertheless, Takatu simply kills the wand with a simple command. Having done that, Riza realizes that the guy can destroy anything with just a thought, so she puts hostility aside and decides to cooperate with the two. Despite that, the only way she can use her magic is through her wand, so she takes out the last one she had on hand. Since she took the item from a delicate place, Danora is worried that Takatu is too focused on the scene, but he's just impressed with the fact that Riza can hide a wand in such a way. Then Takatu orders the captain to reveal her intentions, and she confesses that more people are coming after Danora besides her. The first evidence of this appears at that moment when a shadow tries to attack the girl, but her ancestral spirit from the Danora family manifests at the right moment to counter the hostility. But after the counterattack, the group realizes that it was just a doll and several identical ones were behind them. With that, Riza takes advantage of her companion's help and positions herself again for battle, but Takatu eliminates the problem on the spot. Nearby, Chelsea orders her dolls to beat that woman to death, but as they advance, Takatu eliminates them one by one. Chelsea feels what happened and mourns for her beloved dolls. Then the protagonists reach the staircase where she was hiding, and the girl resorts to tears, begging the two to stop their wickedness. They look at her with their usual skeptical expressions, but since Chelsea has surrendered, they get the information they need about her master. Observing the scene with spy insects, Tachibana learns that Riza died and Chelsea is out of action. Also, Takatu destroys anything he wants with his thoughts. Therefore, he decides to take the targets to a more easily observable place while attacking. As for the protagonists, they try to escape, but hundreds of cockatiels on the staircase are driving Danora crazy. Mokomoko knows that Tachibana is using these insects to monitor their group. Thus, Danora asks Takatu to kill them all, but the young man reminds her that these birds will fall on her head if that happens. So Danora decides to change her mind. But then Takatu remembers that these cockatiels cannot be left alive because they are capable of killing a human, for example, by entering the person's mouth in large numbers and suffocating them. Imagining this happening to her, Danora curses the entire bloodline of the despicable Yuki Tachibana. Mokomoko reminds the two that in this rhythm, the entire city is going to turn into zombies, so wisely they decided to continue with their plans. Since they didn't kill the insects, Tachibana thought that the presence of the bugs was hindering the boy's power, so he decides to attack to solve the problem. He orders the cockatiels themselves to attack. The insects light up in red and seem increasingly hostile, so Takatu decides to try a technique at that moment. If everything goes as he imagined, it won't be a problem to kill Tachibana right now. He focuses on a kind of magical portal that takes his thoughts to the target, and even though he's far from him, Takatu manages to bring down his enemy. However, since the cockatiels were still standing, the protagonist imagines that the master's death has freed the insects from prison. This news terrifies Danora, who thinks that this will make those disgusting creatures even more unpredictable. Danora asks the guy to wipe them all out, but Takatu asks if it's fair to kill a creature just because we think they are unpleasant. And with that life lesson, the two leave the place. Returning to the Dominator Master, Stephanie tries to bring him back with her healing magic, but absolutely nothing works. Euphemia announces that she's leaving since she's now free from the slavery power, but the fourth-class bodyguard doesn't seem to share that idea, so she decides to stay with her master. Leaving the hiding place, Euphemia comes across the fight between Lane and the Darkness. Soon, she warns the vampire that she has no chance against such a force, and since she doesn't know how to deal with that enemy, she decides to listen to the woman. With that, she enchants Euphemia and bites her, making her servant to extract everything she knows. Meanwhile, Takatu and Danura descend to the city and discover that practically the entire population of Hanabusa has been turned into undead, and Masayuki declares the start of the zombie epidemic hunting humans. Already Lane, the immortal vampire, has Euphemia under control after the kiss, and she begins to tell her new follower about her intention to test the abilities of Yogiri Takatu. Since Lane has an absurd restoration ability, she feels confident in finding out whether Takatu can eliminate her or not. The protagonist reaches the midst of the chaos that the city has become, but he believes they can pass through without major issues if they are cautious, considering that these zombies are quite slow. Danura expresses her desire to try to save the people suffering from this epidemic, but both Takatu and Mokomoko think they don't have the ability to help in such a situation, so their plan is just to navigate through the confusion. Meanwhile, Masayuki is being pressured by one of Lane's assistants, the city mayor named Ryuta Takahashi, who claims that Lane left the city of Hanabusa in his hands. However, the commander of the Immortal Corps also claims to be under the orders of the vampire, who commanded him to take control of the city. Without resistance, the mayor hands over the key to him, and the commander announces to the entire population that they are after Yogiri Takatu and Tomochika Danura. Therefore, all citizens must gather in the central square within an hour, dead or alive. If this doesn't happen, the zombies will resume chasing the entire population with full force. There's no use trying to escape because the barriers around the city are locked. In other words, either they hand over Takatu with his friend or everyone will turn into zombies. Watching the broadcast, the mayor enters the radio booth and gets upset because Masayuki threatened everyone, but the commander argues that just asking wouldn't have the desired effect, so he needed to provide an incentive to get what he needs. Therefore, Ryuta becomes extremely nervous with the leader of the zombies as he fought hard to elevate the status of the city only to see everything ruined like this. From that point on, Hanabusa becomes a pandemonium of witch hunting, with the entire population arming themselves to find the two fugitives from Masayuki. Hiding in the alleys, Danura can no longer say whether the zombies are more dangerous than these crazed people, while Takatu reflects that they are probably being pursued because they killed that arrogant sage the other day, so he concludes that indiscriminate killing has its disadvantages. Soon, some residents approach the protagonist duo, and as the first one advances, Takatu quickly knocks the man down, making the rest reconsider their actions and flee immediately. Reflecting on what happened, Danura and Takatu start to worry because even the citizens are becoming aggressive, suspecting that Masayuki intentionally turned the residents against them, thinking that the two wouldn't eliminate ordinary people. Therefore, maybe it's better to voluntarily appear in the central square to negotiate a more peaceful resolution to this conflict. So they traverse a Hanabusa cursed by chaos until they manage to find the leader of the zombies, and Masayuki finds this the most anticlimactic way to surrender, as he was expecting a more exciting pursuit. Therefore, he starts taunting the two humans, who are just trying to negotiate their departure via train to the real capital, so they need the barriers removed to reach the station. But the fact that Takatu is requesting this without any nervousness infuriates the zombie leader, so his veins pop out and he shouts that the two humans are not in a position to demand anything at the moment. Therefore, Takatu thinks it might be fairer to give something in return for this favor and offers to let Masayuki live even though he's a jerk. This is the cue for the undead boss to completely lose it, ordering the Immortal Courts to massacre that arrogant human since this Takatu cannot kill those who are already dead. But that's not exactly how things go down, and the protagonist eliminates all the enemies instantly. Witnessing this, the city mayor raises his hands and tries to distance himself, saying he has nothing to do with this zombie invasion. Meanwhile, Masayuki is upset with his dead allies dying again, asking Takatu how he can do this. Takatu has no idea how it's possible, but in his mind, those enemies were kind of alive since they could move. Either way, he decides who is alive or dead, and since those dead were moving, they were alive in the end. With that, Masayuki shouts Lane's name, asking if that vampire knew that this human was capable of doing this. To counter the attack, Masayuki starts transforming into a bizarre zombie bat until Takatu extinguishes him without ceremony. Danura feels sorry that the boy didn't wait for Masayuki to transform, but he wasn't in the mood for that. After that, the girl asks what they will do about the barriers since the zombie leader was dead, but fortunately, the city mayor was there and could be useful. He explains that it was Sage Lane who sent the immortal court after them, and the duo is surprised having another sage besides Cheyenne and moreover, wanting to capture both of them. Speaking of which, Mokomoko warns that spiritual energy with the intent to kill is being manipulated in the direction of this city, so it seems that these enemy forces are not sparing any effort to stop Denura and Takatu. In addition, this magical energy seems to move the citizens of Hanabusa themselves this time. For this reason, Mayor Ryota tries to intervene in the situation because he can't stand so much chaos in his city anymore, so he takes Hanabusa's key and tries to activate some kind of device. However, the key does not respond. For this reason, Ryota suspects that Lane herself is personally manipulating the barrier. And in the meantime, the suspicions are confirmed when Lane herself is concerned that this strategy is very dangerous because the interference of Yuki Tachibana was identified from a distance by Takatu, and he managed to eliminate the target from countless kilometers away. And because of this concern, Lane asks Euphemia the degree of danger she thinks Yogiri Takatu represents. Tachibana's former bodyguard presumes that this guy may be above a sage, a swordsman, or even a mythical being, so it would be prudent not to mess with such an individual. Lane feels secure in her potential, but that doesn't mean she's reckless enough to underestimate a power like Takatu's. Regardless, she has no choice but to continue her mission. Meanwhile, the cursed population of Hanabusa surrounds the protagonists, and Denura asks if Takatu can identify the source of this manipulation to destroy the threat. However, he explains that it probably doesn't apply to this case as Tachibana was connected to the servants themselves, making it easier to identify the source of energy for that reason. At that moment, several enemies attack and are neutralized by Takatu. While they contemplate a way out of the situation, Mayor Ryuta Takahashi seems extremely distressed at witnessing so many ordinary citizens of Hanabusa dying right in front of him in this manner. Lane begins to move more pieces on the chessboard by provoking the arrival of darkness in the city where her enemy is trapped. Additionally, she projects several clones of her body, making Takatu feel the multiplication of hostile energy even from a distance. At that moment, darkness invades Hanabusa and disintegrates every building in its path. Lane's clones are waiting for the signal from the master to attack if anything deviates from the expected. Observing that horrifying creature, Denura asks his friend if he can do something about it. However, despite Takatu feeling that he can help, he has a bad feeling. Nevertheless, he can't simply leave things as they are, so he applies his instant death technique to darkness. Even though it is eliminated, a strange charge is seen reacting in the creature's body, causing a meteor shower over the city. Takatu doesn't know what it is, but he presumes that some malevolent force has allied with Darkness's thirst for revenge and is causing this attack, perhaps wanting to annihilate the entire city or observing his capabilities. However, upon closer inspection, Denura identifies that the comets falling from the sky are several women in red, descending in hordes towards the ground. The mayor alerts that it is indeed Lane involved in this. Despite that, since she is not personally on the offensive, she cannot be the direct target of Takatu's automatic counterattack, as he well remembers. Moreover, they are so fast in their descent that the boy may not react in time if a clone falls on him. So Ryuta tries to cooperate with his broader view of the city, having access to exclusive technologies as the mayor. He informs that these aerial attacks have a pattern, not hitting the same place twice, and consecutive attacks are not made near each other. Mokomoko comments that even though Lane seems to be doing something random, she knows exactly what she is doing. With this information, the mayor deduces where the attacks will be in a short time and takes Takatu to the designated location via teleportation, another exclusive technology of the mayor. Upon arrival, within seconds, one of the vampire's replicas is about to hit the field. Takatu kills the target while Mokomoko envelops the humans in a shield to protect them from the impact. After the dust settles, Mokomoko explains that she had acquired a Furimoru from Darkness not long ago, and it is a flexible magical object that can become a protective barrier or even armor. Thus, the other copies of Lane begin to catch fire, and the original sage wonders how immortal vampires can be killed. But she knew that if the first clone died, the same would happen to all the others since they were made from the same mold. However, that doesn't mean there isn't another solution. Therefore, Lane tries to create other replicas using a slightly different configuration from the previous one to bypass this logic. Despite this, before she could perform her trick, the vampire realizes that her original body is dead in another dimension, so she falls lifeless while catching fire. At that moment, a child awakens in her coffin and receives a message from Lane, informing that her plan worked because even though she is dead, the child survived. Then she decides to reveal the true identity of the little girl, saying that she is Lane herself, but in a separate body that inherited no memories from the vampire to avoid Yogiri Takatu's attacks. After that, all the chaos in Hanabusa had finally come to an end, and Mayor Ryuta Takahashi thanks the two protagonists for their help. Danura is pleased with the recognition but asks if the fact that they had dealt with that sage a few days ago will cause any problems for them. However, Ryuta is calm and responds that he didn't have much respect for that unbearable figure. Thus, he grants a vehicle for them to continue their mission to the royal capital. When Danura gets in the car and asks when Takatu will take the wheel, he replies that he always crashes the car in absolutely every turn in the racing games he usually plays, so probably him driving is not a good idea. With that, Danura thinks it's better to take the wheel, leaving Mokomoko excited, saying how happy she is to see the Danura family's great skill in driving and practice. However, Tomochika is already tired of the ghost putting the family name on everything they do, as if it were a natural talent for everything in life. Later, a samurai named Ryuko Minomiya beheads a creature threatening her group, earning immediate admiration from the rest of the accompanying swordsmen. Subsequently, they all return to the camp where they are housed, and Ryuko encounters the ninja Carol, who was invading her tent. Carol admits that she was trying to take the samurai's phone in an attempt to see Takatu's monitoring tool, but unfortunately couldn't. Surprised by the audacity and talent of the girl in being able to enter unnoticed, the samurai asks Carol what kind of class she is, and the girl explains that she is an unusual type of American ninja. Ryuko asks if she is without any monitoring system since she was looking for hers, so Carol Slane explains that they were preparing an exclusive satellite to observe Takatu, but this device has no use in this world. Then an alarm goes off on the samurai's phone, warning that the first Alpha Omega gate has been opened. In the middle of the road, the protagonists are navigating through an extremely perilous path, and Danura begins to realize by the twists and turns that it would be better for Takatu to be the one really driving, but only God can wake this boy up from another deep slumber. Ahead of the driver, a giant rock appears that cannot be avoided, and at that moment, the guy goes back to dreaming about scenes from his childhood. His stepmother asks if he likes the name Yogiri Takatu, then teaches the boy how to introduce himself to others, leaving the boy excited about the affection he is receiving. In the same dream, we see Asaka Takatu in a final exam, signing a work agreement that basically boils down to not complaining even if you die on duty. On the other side of the table, a man named Yukio Shiraishi agrees with the woman's observation about the contract. Just as she was about to bail out of this situation, Yukio pulls her back and convinces the girl to sign. Shortly afterward, she asks if she is being taken to a secret base of an evil organization, but he explains to Asaka that it is just a reputable institution conducting experiments. Asaka becomes curious about her role in that place, and Yukio explains that, in short, she will have to take care of the monster, as they are still conducting malicious experiments in this Life Forms Research Institute. Asaka was already terrified by this talk, but the panic only increases when she faces a giant and dark corridor. The scientist explains that this is a sacred text, a comfort for ordinary people. They reach another elevator towards the woman's workplace, where Yukio explains that the term Alpha Omega is the beginning and the end of the Greek alphabet, and it means everything or eternity. This is the code name of the test subject she will take care of. Asaka asks if it is a human, but since the scientist has never had contact with the subject, he cannot say for sure. The only thing he can convey is that Alpha Omega can kill anything it wants. Hearing that absurdity, the woman asks if that's what they want her to deal with, but Yukio argues that she has a teacher's license, and that should be enough. Furthermore, there is the possibility of humanity being extinct if this experiment is not conducted correctly. With proper education, they might be able to prevent that. The girl says there are many more qualified people for such a matter, but despite that, Yukio responds that there were applications for this job and Asaka is the perfect candidate. Additionally, the scientist cannot provide any more information, and if Asaka needs to know anything, it will be written in the instructions. So he bids farewell and wishes her good luck, leaving her alone with a titanium valve that she opens with her new badge, while she curses that if humanity ends, it won't be her fault. Crossing the entrance, she enters a strange world, and using a map drawn in the instructions, she manages to reach her workplace, where she looks for someone who can receive her. Eventually, she opens one of the doors and comes face to face with a young boy. At first, she is indignant with a child trapped inside and throws him out of the house, telling the boy to play with some river crab. However, he eliminates a creature that was after the woman, and the boy explains that she arrived there hiding behind her own shadow, and this type of demon usually appears to try to kill him. Next, he explains that he doesn't mind playing but asks if it can be tomorrow as it is getting dark. Asaka comes to her senses and remembers to introduce herself appropriately. As soon as she says her name to the boy, he replies that he is called Alpha Omega. The one explains that this is just a code name for him, so he adds that he used to be called Mr. Okakushi before being taken to this place. After that, Asaka prepares instant noodles for the child, and as he eats, he is amazed by the taste. Soon, the tutor asks if his mother called him by any name, But as the boy has no idea what mother means, she decides to make up a name. Looking directly at his face, she envisions a puppy in her head that makes her decide on the name Yogiri. Therefore, Yogiri repeats his name and adds the woman's last name Takatu, as he heard that's what people do, putting the family name after the first name, and since he didn't have one, he wanted to borrow hers. So she agrees to let the boy use her family name and teaches the little one to introduce himself properly to others, earning a genuine smile from the child. At this moment, Yogiri wakes up in the car while replying to Asaka that it was also a pleasure to meet her. Seeing an opportunity to fully wake him up, Denora shakes him and alerts that they are in a dead end. She takes the chance to mock the fact that Takatu slept so well in the midst of this madness, but he says that he used a lot of his ability in Hanabusa, and that left him very tired. Later, he asks why they need to go to the royal capital, which annoys Denora for him, only asking that at this point. Takatu explains that their goal is to talk to Siam the sage and that this might take them back to the real world. And since that's the goal, maybe they don't even need to go through the royal capital. But Denora reminds him that all their classmates are going there, so she puts the car in reverse to try to go around the rock. However, they end up hitting a dragon on the way, and of course, Yogiri ends its life instantly. But this time, dozens of other dragons were flying towards them, thirsty for blood and spitting fire. Despite all this fury, Takatu wipes out all enemies at once, making Denora comment that the scene looks like a bug spray commercial. But the danger was far from over because shortly after, a golden thunder dragon appears in front of them. However, Takatu does not detect any signs of hostility in this monster, and despite its threatening appearance, the dragon only says that they passed the test and flies away. They try to call the dragon back as it can communicate with humans, but the winged creature does not listen. For this reason, Takatu shouts that if the dragon doesn't come back, it will have the same fate as the others, and with that, the creature freezes in the air instantly, making Denora wonder how this creature can fly without flapping its wings. So back to the protagonists, the dragon reveals its original form as a little girl, justifying that she wanted the test if they were qualified to see the sword master, an incredible being capable of granting the gift to those who deserve it. However, Takatu responds that he has nothing to do with that, as he just wants to reach the royal capital, leaving the dragon embarrassed for having taken the sword master for granted. Thus, the little girl pleads with them to go see the master since he asked her to recruit some new candidates and he rivals a sage. So Takatu realizes that suddenly they could find out something about returning to the original world by talking to this sword master, but Denora thinks it wouldn't be good for them to change course since they are already lost enough. Hearing this, the dragon offers to show them the way to the royal capital as long as they visit the master first, and finally introduces herself as Attila and jumps into the car even before any response. After the journey, they arrive at a place where several swordsmen are trying to become the next sword master, and today they are deciding who will be the next knight of the Divine King. One of the candidates praises the fact that the intruders managed to get there but warns that they are already disqualified. However, at this moment, Yogiri, the sword master, appears, retorting that no test has started yet, so there's no reason to disqualify anyone. After this scolding, Yogiri orders everyone to start battling until he says stop, making Denora rethink the image she had of this old man. Yogiri adds that if more than half of the swordsmen haven't died in 10 minutes, everyone will be disqualified. Takatu raises his hand and says he doesn't mind being disqualified and asks if he can leave. However, Yogiri seems dissatisfied and creates a new rule for the test, stipulating that if anyone leaves, everyone will fail. So the master orders the competition to begin and all the candidates start fighting. A body falls in front of Denora, which scares the girl, so Mokomoko comments that the girl has seen worse than that to be scared by this scene, and Tomachika responds that it takes a bit more than that to make her scream. Then some men try to attack Takatu, but at the same moment, a warrior arrives to protect him, shouting to the four winds that he knows the sword master's intention with this test, which is to know who among them has the ability to act like a knight of the divine wood. But besides that, Takatu identifies some wizards with the intention of killing hidden in the bushes, so he eliminates all of them. As the enemy suddenly fell, the warrior interpreted that the sword master had punished those insolent troublemakers, relieving Denora from having to explain how it really happened. After the slaughter, the handsome warrior has the brilliant idea of asking Denora to take a walk with him. At the moment, another injured swordsman begs them to give him the rainbow stone. In fact, it was an apology stone, and it completely regenerates the boy. Yogiri orders the survivors to follow him, while Attila begs the protagonist to participate in the trial, because if he becomes a knight of the Divine King, she could become his follower. Since they haven't gathered any relevant information yet, Takatu and Denora decide to follow the group. So the gallant warrior introduces himself as Rick, and Denora asks why he speaks as if he were some kind of celebrity. Later, the Shire guy says his name is Lino, and explains that he's only there by invitation from a friend. Takatu asks who the Divine King is, and Rick says that he deals with the gods who were sealed, called demons. 1,000 years ago, the Dark God was sealed by the hands of the Divine King himself. However, this evil being is still a threat even when sealed, as his descendants are active behind the scenes throughout the country. Denora asks Lionel what stone he used, and the boy says he received them as an apology, and that they can heal serious injuries. Denora is impressed that someone gave such an artifact to the boy just as an apology, so Lionel explains that he has always been very unlucky, and that on a day when he was sacrificed by a criminal organization, when he thought it would be the end of everything, a goddess appeared and gave him an apology stone. Denora comments that she still doesn't understand the connection between things, so she asks Mokomoko if the gods can really influence people's destinies, and the ghost explains that yes, not everyone is protected by guardian spirits like young Denora. In the meantime, Rick asks what Gacha is, and Lionel explains that it's a game where he has a chance with 3 stones, and with 30 stones, he has 10 consecutive chances. As a demonstration, he throws the stones into the air and receives an old cleaning brush in his hands and boasts that this is how he exchanges magic stones for random items. Denora thinks this is a terrible deal while questioning the boy if he's not afraid of running out of stones. Lionel elucidates that he gets new apology stones at midnight every day, depending on the amount of misfortune that happened that day. Finally, the group crosses a magical barrier that takes them to a place with a giant tower. Mokomoko warns that they need to leave as soon as possible because a very unpleasant smell is passing through the air and something sinister is about to happen. On their side, Lionel vomits some magical element and Denora asks why she doesn't smell it, so Mokomoko explains that he's protecting her from this evil. However, shortly after, Lionel gains resistance to the stench through another apology stone, making Denora comment that his life seems quite easy with these things in his pocket. The group looks around and realizes that Attila has disappeared, but imagining that she could appear at any moment, they decide to continue their journey until they enter an elevator where the other candidates are with the Sword Master. From the top of the tower, Yogiri reveals the end of the world, where at the center of the magical mass stood the mistress of the ancient sword and the Black God, frozen when the mistress of sword pierced both. Despite the sealing, danger still lingers in the air. While Yogiri explains, a mage named Frederica interrupts, stating that defeating the enemies will solve this. Lionel mentions that she was the one who invited him there, and the young woman vows to retire Yogiri and destroy the Black God on her own. To prove herself, she unleashes a solar explosion at the end of the world. However, as the fireball loses speed, Yogiri explains that time runs differently inside, so it could take centuries for the flame to reach the Black God. Afterwards, the Sword Master announces that the selection of knights begins now, and a subordinate presents the details. She explains that the goal is to go from the roof to the first floor of the tower within 24 hours. A candidate named Teresa asks if it's allowed to jump from the top to the ground, and the subordinate explains that everyone must accumulate 100 points within the tower, so there are tasks to be done inside. Additionally, special participants will be added to the competition. In the meantime, Denora asks if Takatu could win this competition with his power, but the young man appears disturbed by a situation when the mist was very thick. He then whispers a secret in his friend's ear, leaving her furious. With that, Takatu urges Denora to hurry out of this tower, but when it's time to head out on the mission, Frederica tells Lionel to pass her the magic stone so she can replenish her mana, but the boy reveals they only work for him. So the girl tosses one of the stones on the ground, rumbling that this kid always slows her down. Right at the start of the tower, Rick thanks the kind souls who braved the tower before them because most of the traps had already been triggered, leaving only a few. Unlucky as ever, Lionel activates a spear that pierces his chest, but once again, he cheats death with a stone of apology. Seeing the scene, Denora asks why the boy doesn't carry one of those around since he's always getting into trouble, so he decides to tie one to his hand to avoid kicking the bucket unexpectedly. Fired up by the resolution, Lionel charges into the next challenge only to fall into another trap in the next room. The group enters the room to rescue their companion, and there was Teresa amidst an absurd amount of blood asking Rick not to judge her hastily, despite all the destruction trailing behind her. Rick asks why she's participating in the challenge even though she's already a knight, and she explains that she accidentally killed many people, so her credentials were revoked and she was forced to retake the exams. Rick tells the rest of the group to get out of there, but Denora notices that it won't be possible because several thin wires are spread all over the place. Admiring the view of the enemy, Teresa announces it would be a shame if the trash in front of her survived because a knight of the Divine King needs to be truly powerful. But as Rick aptly points out while shielding himself from the wires with his shield, if strength were the only requirement to be a knight, Teresa wouldn't have been demoted. Observing the discussion, Denora knows that Strange Girl is holding back her true ability and just playing with Rick. Then Takatu enters the fray, eliminating the enemy in his usual manner. Then he sees in her hands the Stone of Apology, the same one Lionel uses, and looking around, Danora sees the boy pleading for the stone again, lying on the ground without an arm. After that, the group reaches floor 98, where the person in charge of the test informs them it's a safe zone where they can rest. Takatu suggests they all split up since they'll probably have to kill each other at some point. Rick agrees, realizing this exam is crueler than he imagined, and asks if Takatu and Danora will be okay without him. The protagonist assures the warrior he can rest easy, while Lionel can't wait for midnight to earn a few more stones and stay in the game. With that settled, Rick and Lionel book a room each and go to rest, but when the two remaining try to get their accommodations, the examiner states there's only one room left. With no other choice, Takatu and Danora accept, and to top it off, Mokomoko is always present, but she asks them not to mind because she'll always be hidden by the walls. Danora replies that it still seems pretty embarrassing, but Takatu wastes no time and jumps into bed in pajamas, falling asleep instantly. Meanwhile, Lionel is happy he's made it far in this challenge after only dying 15 times. As if the happiness wasn't enough, he just received 100 stones of apology, plus a free gacha. Soon he rushes to see what he got in this gacha, and tossing the necessary stones into the air, he eagerly awaits whether he'll receive a sinister weapon or an ally character. But instead, the goddess who reincarnated him in this world appears. She says she's coming to take a look around and updated his respawn point to this floor, so every time he dies, he'll respawn there to ensure his nap. Despite this, Lionel thinks this place is too dangerous, but the goddess disappears without answering. In the meantime, the examiner shows concern because the number of deaths doesn't match the number of souls, but Grabe says she doesn't need to worry about that since they probably have enough to maintain the second barrier. The girl agrees, adding that they need to replenish the half-demons for the first barrier. Far away, a girl pursues a candidate sage, saying if the boy refuses her offer this time, she'll have to kill him. Then she uses an ability to identify she's facing Rakuto Seitu, a transmigrant blessed by God with his power. Satan finds it boring to be revealed by magical eyes and asserts he can also know the girl's name if that's all. Then he calls out Aoi Hayanos' name and attacks her with magical tentacles. In response, she uses an ability called Only World, which could be defined as the world that only rewards effort. The tentacles are eliminated, and then Rakuto casts another spell on the girl, who retaliates with the exact same spell, as she's always been able to do. However, the boy isn't convinced of defeat and tries to use the funeral pyre to end the battle, but nothing happens. Hayanos explains that God granted him power without any effort and probably took it back without any effort as well. But the boy says he didn't receive this power from God as he draws his sword. Hayanos assesses that this weapon holds a high value of faith, so it won't be able to destroy the sword. Then she eliminates the boy on the spot. After that, the girl receives a message from her dagger, saying her next job is to eliminate her next targets, Yogiri Takatu and Tomochika Danora. At that moment, the healer Hanakawa arrives in a hurry and kneels before the girl, recounting that he survived a forest full of dangerous monsters because he was rescued by Rakuto. But now that the girl killed him, Hanakawa claims he has no hope left, so he begs to be Oi's servant. On that same morning, Mokomoko wakes Danora up because she needs help getting out of the wall since she can't get out on her own. When she saw Takatu using the girl as a pillow, she tried to disappear because she thought she was getting in the way of something, but soon got curious and tried to follow the scene, which got her stuck in the wall. On top of that, she found out this tower has the power to absorb the souls of the dead to a specific place, and the energy these walls possess prevented her from moving. At this moment, Takatu wakes up, and with Mokomoko's plea for help, he tries to kill the wall's absorption function while the ghost is being sucked in. Then Takatu manages to locate the target point and detaches Mokomoko from the wall. The ghost cries in despair for almost having died, but Danora reminds him that he died a long time ago. With that done, Takatu believes that this tower has the power to absorb souls for some reason far beyond a mere test. Therefore, he instructs his partner to prepare for the rest of the mission and warns that he will destroy any enemy that appears in their path, no discussion. With this, Danora says that she has known the way the boy uses his power from the beginning, and although he is not always reasonable in choosing to use it, she recommends that he be as cautious as possible, besides saying that the way he solves problems would be exactly the same as she would if she had that ability. This realization embarrasses Takatu, so he turns around and says he's hungry to avoid the subject. Back in Aoi Hayanos, her follower says they should run away from there as soon as possible because her power is to deny overpowered abilities, so it wouldn't be the case against a dragon like that. Despite this, the girl claims it's much easier than it seems because with her ability Only World, she can alter events that appear so they are exactly as she thinks they should be. In the case of the dragon, she thinks a creature of that size can't fly, and as she concludes that the creature falls. Hanako finds it as overpowered as what she claims to fight against, but Aoi argues that it would only be if she could also face objects with high faith value, which is not the case. However, the dragon returns and eats the healer's arm, who heals himself and asks if the girl just took away his flying ability. Aoi replies yes, so a fair fight is on from now on. Then she cuts off the head of the winged monster, revealing inside it an aggressor named Hedgehog, who flees through the skies at the same moment after absorbing all the information he needed. During the escape, Aoi notices a tower in the path where the aggressor was fleeing, so she carries the healer with her to there, who absolutely does not want to meet Takatu again, because he knows the boy will end him as soon as he can. Speaking of him, the protagonist is eliminating all the traps along the way to advance in the challenge until a wizard appears before him complaining that the guy is relying too much on cheating to pass the test. When Danura asks who he is, he reveals that he built this tower and can appear anywhere in it whenever he wants, and then Danura responds that it seems as overpowered as what the two of them are doing. Ignoring her, the mysterious guy complains that he racked his brain to set up all these traps, and someone is passing by destroying everything as if it were nothing. Takatu says they are just trying to get out of that place, but the man replies that it's not possible because that tower was built to keep the dark gods sealed. In turn, the protagonist says he won't do anything to that place if he can leave, but the tower's builder considers the possibility that those two are some trick of the dark god. So he introduces himself as Iglesia, known as the High Sorcerer, but before he could finish his speech, Takatu knocks him out. Danura goes crazy because this guy seemed important to die so quickly, but her friend says the guy would probably try to kill him. Meanwhile, the Sword Master's assistant announces one problem after another, and he gets more and more annoyed. The woman announces another 100 points for Rick, fighter number 97. Next, the warrior meets Frederica, who is helping her friend Lionel accumulate some points since poor guy hasn't won anything so far. Eric praises the progress of his colleague, who thanks God he got a great equipment in the last gacha he did. Somewhere else in the tower, two swordswomen fight each other while Lord Misaki warns the girl named Shiro that she's losing, and that the enemy's blows aren't even that strong, so Shiro can win this duel. Motivated, the rabbit girl advances against her opponent and strikes a monstrous blow that opens a hole in the ground. Thus, Mokomoko comments that these two duelists seem very strong and therefore wants to know what Takatu is going to do about it. In turn, the protagonist has nothing to do with that brawl and just wanted to cross the arena without trouble. Looking around, Danura sees that the only way out is behind that guy sitting on the throne who keeps insisting for Shiro's rival to reveal her disguise once and for all. As it had already been discovered, the woman decides to show who she really is, a half-demon named Theodisia. She intends to end this fight before the Sword Master finds out her real identity, so she casts a spell on Shiro, who manages to dodge by dropping her sword, as she is much faster without a weapon and responds with several punches in succession. Seeing that it will take a while, Takatu asks if the guy on the throne wouldn't let them pass there smoothly, while Danura tells the boy to look around and realize that two people are fighting to the death there. With that, Misaki replies that he won't let the two pass as some of his disciples don't have enough points, but Takatu argues that he and Danura have only 6 accumulated points, so they are small fish. Furious, the Lord of the Arena affirms that's why they need to fight more because he values this exam as a game and doesn't respect that they don't see this situation the same way. The half-demon Theodisia tells the protagonist that she's out of it because she has enough points. Therefore, Misaki announces a 3-on-3 fight where Takatu, Danura, and Theodisia must face the rabbit girl Shiro as well as the big girl Geralda and the short one Ima. Theodisia says she doesn't see any chance of winning if the other two opponents are as strong as Shiro, and the Lord of the Arena makes a point of commenting that the rabbit girl is the weakest of the three, while Ima is a swordswoman and Geralda is a magic specialist. By the way, the Lord intends to take the half-demon and Danura for himself, so they must be left alive. Danura asks if Takatu should only kill Misaki in this situation, but instead he kills the 3 rivals. Thus, he proceeds his way to the exit, and when the Lord tries to stop him because of his hatred, he is eliminated in the same way. Staying Takatu's power, Theodisia asks for the boy's help. She wishes that both of them help her find her missing sister because she heard that her people were trapped in this place. However, helping Theodisia might seem bad in the eyes of the Sword Master, as it may violate the exam rules. Still, Takatu is already in deep trouble, so he doesn't mind getting a bit dirtier. Thus, the swordswoman explains that her companions are probably underground and somehow she can sense their presence. At this moment, the rest of the group comes across Takatu and Danura. Moments later, the group reaches the hall from where they came. The Sword Master observes that 17 competitors have made it to the end and declares them all Knights of the Divine King. But at this moment, his assistant alerts Uraev that the tower has fallen silent, making it difficult to maintain the first barrier, and the second one is unstable. In other words, the god could break the protection at any moment. And as soon as the girl finishes saying that, the first barrier is destroyed, while the second one proves to be quite vulnerable. At this moment, a winged being descends from the heavens, thinking that destroying the tower would make the barrier disappear. Uraib thought all of this would happen in 3 days, but duty calls now. Therefore, he summons the Knights of the Divine King for their first mission. They must defeat the winged creature or humanity will be lost. In the confusion, Takatu takes the opportunity to search the underground, but Danura is upset because the boy simply doesn't want to do anything against that. The young man explains that dealing with that flying monster will attract too much attention from the Sword Master, so it's better to leave it to others and remain discreet. Meanwhile, Lionel, Rick, and Frederica stand firm in their duty, and the enemy asks how he can break the barrier. If Uraib gives the answer, he will be spared. On the other hand, the Sword Master mocks the fact that the monster is asking this after destroying the entire tower. Thus, the winged man eliminates a knight with just a hand gesture and claims he will do the same with each one until he gets what he wants. Soon, 4 warriors have been annihilated, until one of them tries to react with several clones, but all are erased with the same ease. Then, Frederica says she can defeat the enemy even without the barrier, and gathering all her power, she invokes the extremely compressed light explosion, which the opponent absorbs as if swatting a mosquito with his hand. Behind the winged man, a unique entity emerges saying that this power was quite formidable for a human, and he would have been burned if the spell had hit the target. Worried about being called by these strange names instead of his own name, the entity introduces himself as Lute, while the flyer is called Orgain. However, the mage is not interested in trivial introductions at this moment, so she advances against the entity, who also absorbs her magic, warning the girl that she is not at the level needed to face both of them. Moreover, he turns Frederica's right arm into candy and begins to eat it in front of her. Rick tries to prevent the humiliation and attacks the child, and with the speed and strength of the blow, she realizes that perhaps this warrior has a better chance than the mage. And just as Rick tries to hit Lute, Lionel takes care of his friend and soon receives a message that he secured another gacha. So he tries his luck and uses all of his apology stones, thus summoning Vahanado, the goddess who brought Lionel to this world. Thus she states that she will resolve everything in the blink of an eye. And approaching the dew of entities, Organ bows and is surprised to see the goddess in this situation, and Lute hugs her because of the time they spent apart. Seeing the scene, Lionel asks what the heck is happening, so Vahanado explains that, in fact, meeting her again will be the worst thing that happened in the boy's life, because when she talked about resolving things, she meant that exterminating the human race is the solution to the problem. In the meantime, Takatu and his companions seem to be walking in an infinite loop, and Mokomoko thinks this is due to a barrier interfering in the empty space. The boy believes that maybe it's an important installation ahead, and that's why it's difficult to reach. The half-demon feels the magical power of her friends more intensely. And at that moment, a bizarre scream is heard, and the barrier disappears, saving the protagonists the trouble, and now they have a clear path to descend. But before continuing the walk, Danura feels a monster with a blade passing through her body until Theodisia opens a door just below and finds several bodies in separate tanks. Looking closely, she presumes that her companions are inside, and even if she hasn't seen her sister thrown into one of these tanks, she feels that the worst may have happened to her too. Takatu believes that these bodies were stored there so that the magical abilities of these beings could be extracted. For this reason, Theodisia draws her sword and ends the suffering of her people. After that, she recalls her tradition, where revenge must always be fulfilled, and thus, she wishes to kill the Sword Master with her own hands. Speaking of him, Uraib notices that the situation is getting darker, and keeping that in mind, he appoints Rick as the Sword Master for now. The boy looks back as if he didn't understand, and the old man explains that this is the best choice at the moment because if Uraib dies, Rick will automatically become the Sword Master. Then, using the power stored in the tower, the young man will be able to fight. After that, Lionel kneels and asks for forgiveness for increasing this problem, and Uraib responds coldly that he never expected anything from that boy from the beginning. Swallowing the harsh words, Lionel remembers that if he dies, he will return to the last save point, so he tries to have a friendly chat with the goddess who always granted the apology stones to him. He innocently questions why she is talking to the enemy, and she wonders if she should tell the boy or not. Soon, she remembers that she has always had a good relationship with Lionel, and that's why she couldn't let him die curious, especially without knowing why. During this idle conversation, Rick realizes that his friend is trying to buy some time for them. So Vanahata reveals that her beloved Albert Garma left and never returned, while Uraib informs that it's the feared and hated god of darkness, whose name no one dares to utter. The goddess recounts that she spread messengers around the world to find her beloved and one day discovered that he was sealed in this tower. But that's not even the worst part, as no matter what she sends, She could never defeat the Sword Master, so she thought about sending someone extremely unlucky like Lionel to force the return of her lost love. Faced with this, Lionel acknowledges the fact of not being the luckiest but didn't expect all this misfortune to bring about the end of humanity as a side effect. Meanwhile, Lute warns the goddess that the barrier is almost disappearing and questions whether they should wait until it happens. So Vanahado pulls out a mirror to see what the next step should be and discovers that the creator of the tower, Iglesia, curiously kicked the bucket, and if he were still alive, he could fix the barrier instantly. Besides him, the goddess assassin, Lord Masaki Kazuno, also bit the dust, and she would be in deep trouble if he were around. In light of this news, Vanahado says that Lionel could be nicknamed the Walking Apocalypse after all this. Therefore, Lionel says he'll end his life to stop this cycle of misfortune, but the goddess warns that even if he does, he'll go straight to the afterlife because she undid the resurrection magic at a safe point. And since he's going to die anyway, Vanahado invites Lionel to wait for the return of her beloved Albagarma. Soon she pulls the core of the barrier and warns that if she breaks it, the barrier will disappear. Then she breaks this long-standing seal that separates her from her beloved, causing the fall of Albagarma, which upon separating from the Divine King, falls directly into a river below, leaving the king confused, thinking his enemy was still alive. At this moment, Denora comments that he thought Takatu was joking when he said earlier that he killed the god of darkness in the reflection, so the young man apologizes. Shortly after, Theodisia takes advantage of the distraction to cut Urab, and the blade monster that Denora thought he sensed on the stairs pierces Vanahado's body. However, Lute heals the master's wound and she rises exuding hatred, while Organ tries to rescue the god of darkness. As he craves human sacrifices, Organ sends his demonic army to collect the soul of every human present. Faced with the attack, the Divine King protects the group near her with a magical barrier, and Takatu asks the two companions to come closer to him and eliminates Organ along with all the demons. Denora questions why he asked them to stay so close, and he argues that this way it's easier to protect both. As for the goddess, Theodisia asks if it wouldn't be better to finish her off too, but Takatu thinks there's no reason for that since she wasn't hostile to him. Amidst this madness, Oi Hayanos arrives with her new servant, Hanakawa, and tries to reassure the guy, stating that they won't die because of this explosive magic rain, as main characters are always protected by the plot to fulfill their role in the story. Upon reaching the group in the tower, she asks Rick if he knows Yogiri Takatu, but the warrior says it's not a good time for that. Oi agrees, and analyzing the guy, she discovers that he has just become the sword master, and Rick remembers that Urabe had mentioned something like that. Then she explains that all he has to do is pierce Vanahado with the Or's sword to resolve the situation, and Rick doesn't understand how this strange girl knows all of this. However, it's not the time to think too much, so he advances against the goddess and impales her with his magical weapon. Next, Oi looks for Takatu again, and Hanakawa can't stop crying because he's sure the guy will erase him as soon as he has the chance. Still, the dust settles and the protagonist appears with the two girls, so Oi tries to analyze him with her eye, but some glitch in the system prevents that from happening. Soon, she needles in distress and notes that Yogiri Takatu is the final destination of all destinies in the form of a man. For this reason, she questions alone how Cheyenne had the courage to summon such a being to that place. Denora notices the arrival of the two guys and asks what Hanakawa is doing there, and the healer quickly puts the blame on Aoi, who is vomiting lunch on the floor. Takatu comments that maybe she's sick, and Oi herself says she'll be okay after a rest, apologizing for a reason Takatu doesn't understand. She explains that she came to return this guy back to them since they were classmates. As the group responds that they don't want Hanakawa back, she says she'll get rid of him right there, kicking him out shortly afterward. While Hanakawa confesses that he's developing a special taste for girls who humiliate him, Takatu asks how he managed to escape from the forest with a collar, and he confesses that he didn't mention that the collar's effect doesn't last forever. At dawn, Rick asks why Theodisia killed the sword master, and she fearlessly replies that she only avenged her people. As Rick is now the master and fearing that the half-demon might attack him too, tensions rise again, but Takatu calms both of them, saying he'll help resolve this deadlock by taking them both underground. Rick innocently asks what Yogiri could do in this situation as he has no abilities, and the Divine King tells the boy to watch how he speaks because Takatu was the one who defeated the god of darkness and his army. Faced with this, the sword master asks who he really is, and Takatu answers that he's an ordinary high school student who was summoned by a sage to this strange world. No one takes the boy too seriously, but soon everyone decides to go to the royal capital, each for their own reason, and Theodisia reveals she will look for her sister Euphemia there. Takatu recalls hearing that name somewhere, and the half-demon asks for information about it. As for the Divine King, she will return to the sanctuary in the royal capital since 1,000 years have passed, and her lineage may have been extinct, while Rick will return to his home in the same city and offers to go with Denura and Taka too, but the two choose to travel alone. Next week, we'll have more of this anime as soon as the new episode is released, so go ahead and subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to hit the like button below to support this video. See you guys.